I paid all the bills in the house, but my family treated me like trash, until the day I finally walked away. I never thought my life would become this exhausting by the time I turned 27. Most people my age were building careers, going on vacations, maybe even thinking about settling down. Me? I was still playing parent to my actual parents. Every morning started the same way. Alarm at 5:30, quick shower, throw on my delivery uniform, grab my keys, and head out before anyone else woke up. The streets were still dark when I started my route, dropping off packages across the city until my back ached and my feet screamed for mercy. By the time I got home around 7 in the evening, I was running on fumes. My parents would be sitting on the couch, laughing at some show, snacks scattered around them like they'd spent the entire day doing absolutely nothing, which, of course, they had. My father was 58, my mother the same age, and according to them, they were too old to work anymore. Never mind that plenty of people their age were still working full-time jobs. Never mind that I was struggling to keep this household running. They had decided, somewhere around 5 years ago, that their working days were over and their daughter would handle everything. And like an idiot, I had let it happen. My younger sister? She'd never worked a day in her life. She was 24 and still lived at home, spending her days scrolling through her phone, going out with friends, and treating our house like a hotel where everything was free. I paid the mortgage. I paid the utilities. I bought the groceries. I covered the internet bill, the phone bills, the insurance, everything. My parents acted like it was my duty, like I owed them for raising me. My sister acted like I was just being a good sibling. Nobody ever said thank you. Nobody ever offered to help. But there's something about family expectations that wraps around your throat and squeezes until you can barely breathe, let alone speak up. My mother would cry whenever I suggested they should contribute somehow. My father would get angry and lecture me about respect and obligation. My sister would roll her eyes and tell me I was being dramatic. So I kept quiet, kept working. Then one Tuesday evening in late March, everything started spiraling in a direction I never saw coming. I walked through the door after a particularly brutal 12-hour shift, every muscle in my body screaming, and found my entire family gathered in the living room like they were staging some kind of intervention. My sister was practically bouncing in her seat, her phone clutched in her hands, a massive smile plastered across her face. My parents looked equally excited, which immediately put me on edge. Nothing good ever came from them looking that happy about something involving me. Guess what? My sister squealed before I could even set my bag down. She thrust her left hand toward me, and I saw it. A diamond ring, small but sparkly, catching the overhead light. I'm engaged! I stared at the ring, then at her face, then at my parents who were beaming like she'd just announced she'd won the lottery. My brain struggled to process this information. Engaged? My sister, who'd never held down a job, never paid a bill, never taken responsibility for anything in her entire life, was getting married? Congratulations, I managed, my voice flat. I was too tired to fake enthusiasm. The wedding is in 3 months, she continued, completely oblivious to my lack of excitement. We're thinking June. It's going to be beautiful. I've already started looking at venues and dresses and— 3 months? I interrupted. That's fast. We don't want to wait, she said, her tone turning slightly defensive. We love each other. Why would we wait? I bit back about 17 different responses, none of them kind. Instead, I nodded and tried to head toward my room, but my father cleared his throat in that way that meant I needed to stay put and listen. There's something we need to discuss about the wedding, he said, and my stomach immediately dropped. I knew that tone. That was his I need something from you tone, the one he used whenever he was about to make me feel guilty for not giving them more money. The total cost is going to be around $40,000, my mother jumped in quickly. His family is paying for half, which is very generous of them, but we need to cover the other $20,000. I felt my jaw clench. $20,000. They were talking about $20,000 like it was pocket change. Like it was something everyone just had sitting around in their bank account. I worked myself to the bone delivering packages, and I barely had $3,000 in savings after paying all their bills every month. That's great, I said carefully. Where are you getting the money? The silence that followed was deafening. My parents exchanged glances. My sister stopped smiling, and I knew, with a sinking certainty that made my chest tight, exactly where this conversation was going. Well, my father started, we were hoping you could help out. It's your sister's wedding. It's a family event. We all need to contribute. Contribute, I repeated slowly. You want me to contribute to a $20,000 wedding? Not all of it, my mother said quickly. Just what you can. We know you've been working so hard and you must have money saved up by now." I actually laughed. I couldn't help it. The sound came out harsh and bitter, echoing in the suddenly tense living room. "Money saved up? I pay for everything in this house. The mortgage, the utilities, the food, all of it. Where exactly do you think I'm hiding this magical pile of money?" "Don't be dramatic," my sister snapped. "You make good money. You're just being selfish because you're jealous." "Jealous?" I turned to look at her directly. "Jealous of what exactly?" "That I'm getting married and you're not," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "That I'm happy and you're miserable. That I have someone who loves me and you're alone." The words hit harder than I wanted to admit, but I refused to let her see it. "I'm not giving you money for your wedding. I don't have it to give." "You're lying," my father said flatly. "You've been working for years. You have to have savings. Any savings I had went to keeping this house running while you two retired early, and I pointed at my sister, "never even tried to get a job. I have maybe $3,000 to my name, and that's my emergency fund. I'm not touching it for a party." "It's not a party," my mother said, her voice rising. "It's your sister's wedding day. It's one of the most important days of her life. How can you be so heartless?" Heartless? I felt something break inside me, some last thread of patience finally snapping. I've been supporting this entire family for 5 years. 5 years of working myself to death while you all live off my paychecks. And now you want me to drain my emergency fund for a wedding that costs more than I make in 6 months? That's not heartless. That's called having boundaries. Boundaries? My sister scoffed. "You're just bitter. You're bitter because nobody wants to marry you. And you can't stand to see me happy." I grabbed my bag and started walking toward my room. "I'm not discussing this anymore. The answer is no." "Then you're not invited to the wedding," she called after me. "If you won't help pay for it, you don't get to celebrate it." I paused at the hallway entrance, turning back to look at her. Fine by me. I locked my bedroom door behind me and sank onto my bed, my hands shaking with anger and exhaustion, and something else I couldn't quite name. Relief, maybe. Relief that I'd finally said no, that I'd finally drawn a line. But underneath the relief was dread, because I knew this wasn't over. My family didn't take no for an answer. They never had. The next few weeks were absolutely miserable. My parents stopped speaking to me unless it was to make some passive-aggressive comment about selfishness or family values. My sister acted like I didn't exist, walking past me in the hallway without acknowledging my presence, making pointed comments about me when I was in earshot. The house felt smaller somehow, the air heavier, every interaction loaded with unspoken resentment. I kept working, kept paying the bills, kept my head down. What else could I do? I couldn't afford to move out, not with how much I was spending on this place every month. I was trapped in a situation of my own making, and everyone knew it. Then, about 6 weeks before the wedding, things shifted. I came home one evening to find my parents in unusually good spirits. My father was actually smiling at me, which set off alarm bells immediately. He never smiled at me anymore. "Good news," he announced as I walked in. "We found a solution for the wedding funding." I set my keys down slowly, waiting for the other shoe to drop. "What solution?" "I managed to get a loan from an old friend," he said proudly. 10,000. And his family agreed to contribute another 5,000 if we scale down the venue. So we're all set. The wedding is happening. "That's great," I said genuinely. I meant it. If they'd found another way to fund this whole thing, then maybe the tension in the house would finally ease up. Maybe we could all move forward and stop treating each other like enemies. But the good feelings didn't last. If anything, my family seemed even more resentful that they'd had to find alternative funding. Like the fact that they'd scrambled to pull together money was somehow my fault. My sister ramped up her social media posts about wedding planning, making sure to tag everyone involved in helping her. Except me, of course. My parents continued their cold treatment, making it clear that my refusal to contribute had permanently damaged our relationship in their eyes. I tried to tell myself it didn't matter, that I'd done the right thing by protecting my emergency fund, that they were being unreasonable and manipulative. But late at night, lying in my bed and listening to them laugh together in the living room, I felt something hollow growing in my chest. This was my family. These were the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally, and they'd chosen money over me without a second thought. The week before the wedding, my father's parents drove in from a neighboring town about 2 hours away. I'd always liked my grandparents. They were quiet, practical people who'd worked hard their entire lives. My grandfather had been a mechanic, my grandmother a seamstress. They'd raised 4 kids on modest incomes and never complained about it. They were nothing like my father, who somehow thought being 58 meant he deserved permanent retirement. The evening they arrived, I was in my room trying to catch up on some rest when my grandfather knocked on my door. I opened it to find him standing there with a serious expression, holding a large manila envelope. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" he asked quietly. "Of course." I stepped aside to let him in. He sat down on the edge of my bed, the envelope resting on his knees. He looked older than I remembered, his hands slightly shaky as he smoothed the envelope's surface. "I need to ask you for a favor, a big one." "Okay," I said slowly, sitting down next to him. "This envelope contains $30,000 in cash," he said quietly. "I need you to keep it safe for me for 3 days. Just 3 days." I stared at the envelope, my brain struggling to process what he was saying. $30,000. In cash. "Grandpa, why—" "The bank is threatening to foreclose on our house," he interrupted, his voice rough with emotion. "We missed some payments when your grandmother got sick last year. The medical bills were substantial. We've been trying to catch up, but it's been hard. I have an appointment with them on Monday to settle everything. But I can't keep this money at the house right now. There's a lien process starting, and if they find out we have this cash, they might try to seize it immediately before we can negotiate. Why not keep it in a safe deposit box?" I asked. "Banks are closed for the weekend, and I need to have it readily accessible for the Monday meeting. I'm also worried about—" He paused, looking uncomfortable. "Your father knows we're having money troubles. I don't trust him not to try to borrow from us. He's done it before, always with promises to pay back that never materialize. I can't risk this money. It's the only thing standing between us and losing our home." I felt anger flare in my chest at the mention of my father borrowing money and never repaying it. Of course he had. Of course he'd taken from his own parents while refusing to support himself. "I'll keep it safe," I promised. "Nobody will know it's here." "You're the only one I trust," my grandfather said, placing the envelope in my hands. "Your father would spend it without thinking twice. Your sister doesn't understand the value of money. But you've always been responsible, always been solid. I know this is a lot to ask, but I need someone I can count on." 3 days, I said firmly. "Monday morning, you'll have it back." He squeezed my shoulder gratefully. "Thank you. You don't know what this means to me." After he left, I sat staring at the envelope for a long time. $30,000. More money than I'd ever held in my life. I couldn't exactly put it in my bank account. That would leave a paper trail, and besides, it wasn't mine to deposit. I needed somewhere secure, somewhere nobody would think to look. I ended up hiding it in the back of my closet, inside an old shoebox that contained some winter scarves I never used. I pushed it all the way to the corner, buried it under other boxes, and tried to forget about it. Just 3 days. I could keep a secret for 3 days. The wedding happened on a Saturday afternoon at a small venue downtown. It wasn't the elaborate affair my sister had originally envisioned, but it was still nice. About 50 guests, decent food, simple decorations. I attended because my grandparents had asked me to, and because refusing would have caused even more drama. But I made it clear I was there as a guest, nothing more. I didn't help with setup. I didn't contribute to the gift. I sat in the back row during the ceremony and kept to myself during the reception. My sister looked beautiful, I'll give her that. Her dress was simple but elegant, and she seemed genuinely happy as she said her vows. For a brief moment, I felt a pang of something that might have been regret. This could have been a day where we celebrated together as a family. Instead, I was practically invisible, an unwanted presence that people acknowledged with tight smiles before moving on. During the reception, my sister made a speech thanking everyone who'd helped make her day possible. She listed out names, my parents, her in-laws, various friends who'd contributed time or money or support. My name never came up. Instead, she made a pointed comment about how some people care more about money than family, and several guests glanced in my direction. I felt my face burn with humiliation, but I kept my expression neutral. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction of seeing me upset. Around 10 in the evening, my father suddenly stood up from his table, his face pale and pinched. He muttered something to my mother about a terrible headache and left the reception early. I thought it was strange. He'd seemed fine earlier, but I was honestly relieved to have him gone. One less person glaring at me across the room. I stayed until the end because my grandparents were there, and I wanted to say goodbye to them properly. They thanked me again for helping them out, reminded me they'd pick up the money Monday morning, and headed back to their hotel. By the time I got home, it was nearly 2 in the morning, and I was exhausted in every possible way. I slept until almost noon the next day, my body finally demanding the rest I'd been denying it for weeks. When I woke up, the house was quiet. My sister and her new husband were presumably off on their honeymoon, and my parents were sleeping in after the late night. I dragged myself out of bed, grabbed some breakfast, and remembered the envelope in my closet. My grandparents would be coming for it tomorrow morning, and I wanted to double-check that everything was still secure. I walked to my closet, moved aside the boxes, and reached for the shoebox with the winter scarves. The envelope was gone. I stood there frozen, my hand hovering over the empty space where it should have been. Gone. $30,000 just gone. I tore apart the closet, throwing boxes and clothes everywhere, desperately hoping I'd just misremembered where I'd hidden it. But it wasn't there. The envelope had vanished completely. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Someone had been in my room. Someone had found the money and taken it. And I had a horrible, sinking feeling I knew exactly who. I stormed out of my room and found my father in the kitchen, making coffee like it was just another normal Sunday morning. He looked up when I entered, his expression neutral. "Where is it?" I demanded, my voice shaking with rage. "Where is what?" he asked, but his eyes flickered with something guilty. The envelope. "The money. You took it from my room." He had the audacity to look confused. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't lie to me," I was shouting now, past the point of caring who heard. $30,000 was in my closet and now it's gone. "You were in my room. You took it." My father set down his coffee mug slowly. "Oh, that money. I thought that was your savings. You've been working so hard I figured you'd finally built up a nest egg." "It wasn't mine," I said, my voice dropping to something dangerously quiet. "It was Grandpa's. He gave it to me to hold for 3 days. He needs it to save his house from foreclosure." For just a second, real fear flashed across my father's face. Then his expression hardened into defensive anger. How was I supposed to know that? "You never told me. You never should have been in my room," I screamed. "You stole from me." "I didn't steal anything," he shot back. "I borrowed money that I thought belonged to my daughter. Money she's been hoarding while her sister needed help with her wedding." "Borrowed?" I felt hysterical laughter bubbling up in my chest. "You call going into someone's private space, taking money without permission, and spending it all without asking. You call that borrowing?" "Don't be dramatic," he said, waving his hand dismissively. "Family doesn't steal from family. I was helping. That's what fathers do. We make the hard decisions that benefit everyone." "Benefit everyone?" My voice was climbing higher, getting shrill. "You benefited yourself by paying off your debt. You benefited my sister by funding a vacation she didn't need. Who exactly did this help besides the two of you?" "Your sister deserved a nice honeymoon," he said stubbornly. "She's starting her married life. Those memories are important, and the loan I took out was causing me stress. I needed to clear that burden." "Your parents are going to lose their house," I was screaming now, all pretense of control abandoned. "The house they've lived in for 40 years. The house where you grew up. The house filled with their memories and their life. And you destroyed that to give your adult daughter spending money for a trip." "My parents have resources," he said, but his voice wavered slightly. "They've been managing their finances for decades. They'll work something out with the bank." That money was what they were working out. I slammed my hand on the counter, and my father flinched. That $30,000 was their last chance to negotiate. The bank was going to foreclose. This was literally their only option. And you just threw it away like it was nothing. "I didn't throw it away," he protested weakly. "I used it for important things. Your sister's happiness is important. My peace of mind is important." "More important than your parents having a roof over their heads?" I asked quietly. "That's what you're saying right now. That your daughter's vacation and your debt relief matter more than your parents being homeless." He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "You're twisting my words." "I'm repeating your words," I corrected. "I'm just making you hear how they actually sound." My blood went cold. "What did you do with it?" "Your sister needed funds for her honeymoon," he said, lifting his chin like he was proud of himself. "I gave her $20,000 so she could have a proper trip with her husband. And I used $10,000 to pay back the loan I took out. The friend who lent it to me was getting impatient. It's all handled. Everyone's taken care of." "Everyone's happy?" I repeated incredulously. "You just destroyed your parents' lives. That money was supposed to save their house." "My parents will figure something out," he said dismissively. "They always do. But your sister's honeymoon was happening now. It was time-sensitive. I couldn't breathe. I literally could not get air into my lungs. My father had stolen $30,000 from his own parents, money they desperately needed, to fund a vacation for my sister and pay off his debt. And he didn't even look sorry. He looked annoyed that I was making a big deal about it. They're coming tomorrow morning to pick it up, I said, my voice hollow. What am I supposed to tell them? Tell them the truth. He shrugged. Tell them I took it. I'll pay them back eventually. Eventually? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. You've never paid back a loan in your life. Never. You've borrowed from me, from them, from everyone, and you never pay it back. I'm your father, he said, his voice rising. You need to show some respect. I did what I thought was right for this family. You did what was right for you, I corrected. You always do what's right for you. And now your parents are going to lose their home because of it. The front door opened, and my grandfather walked in. He'd let himself in with the spare key, probably expecting this to be a quick pickup. He was smiling when he entered the kitchen, but that smile died the moment he saw our faces. Is everything all right? He asked slowly. I couldn't speak. I physically could not make words come out of my mouth. My father stepped forward, his expression shifting into something apologetic and weak. Dad, there's been a situation with the money. Where's the envelope? My grandfather interrupted, looking directly at me. He took it, I managed to say, pointing at my father. He went into my room yesterday and took it. He gave $20,000 to my sister for her honeymoon and used $10,000 to pay off his own debt. It's gone. The color drained from my grandfather's face. He stood there swaying slightly, and I thought for a horrible moment that he might collapse. Gone? He whispered. Dad, I can explain. My father started. You stole from me? My grandfather's voice was soft, almost wondering. You stole the money I needed to save our home? I didn't know what it was for, my father said quickly. Bryn never told me. I thought it was her savings. I was trying to help your granddaughter have a good wedding. By stealing $30,000 from your parents? My grandfather's voice was getting louder now, stronger. Money we've been saving for months? Money we need by tomorrow? I'll pay you back, my father said. I just need some time. You've been saying that for 20 years, my grandfather shouted. And I'd never heard him raise his voice before. Every time you borrow money, every time you take from us, you promise to pay it back. And you never do. Never. But this time you've gone too far. My sister chose that moment to walk in through the back door, returning from wherever she'd stayed the night after the wedding. She was practically glowing, her phone in her hand, probably still posting honeymoon photos. She stopped short when she saw us all gathered in the kitchen, the tension thick enough to cut. What's going on? She asked, her tone wary but not concerned, like she was walking into someone else's drama that didn't really affect her. Your father stole my money to pay for your honeymoon, my grandfather said flatly. Her eyes widened, and for a second I saw genuine fear cross her face. What? No, he said it was... She looked at my father, then at me, confusion mixing with dawning realization. He gave me $20,000 yesterday morning. He said you'd finally decided to help out, that you'd come through for family. And you believed that? I asked quietly. You really believed I'd suddenly give you $20,000 after everything? She shifted uncomfortably, her confident smile faltering. I didn't ask too many questions. I just thought maybe you'd changed your mind. Or maybe Dad had convinced you. I don't know. I didn't think he'd... She stopped, seeming to realize how bad this sounded. You didn't think... Period, my grandfather said, his voice cold. You took $20,000 without asking where it came from because you didn't want to know, because knowing might have meant giving it back. I needed it for my honeymoon, she said defensively, her voice rising. I'm starting a marriage. That's important. That matters. And it's not my fault if Dad made bad choices about where to get the money. It was supposed to save their house, I shouted, gesturing at my grandparents. Their home. The place where they've lived their entire adult lives. How was I supposed to know that? She shot back, but her voice wavered. Nobody told me. Dad just handed me the money and said to have a good trip. I thought it was a gift. I thought he was being a good father for once. My grandfather made a sound, something between a gasp and a sob. My grandmother reached for his arm, steadying him. My sister didn't even look at them. She was looking at her phone again, probably checking her honeymoon photos, already moving on from this conversation like it was just a minor inconvenience in her day. A house is not just a building, I said, my voice shaking. It's their life. It's where they raise their family. It's where Grandma's sewing room is, where Grandpa's workshop is. It's where they buried their dog in the backyard. It's where every Christmas and Thanksgiving happened. It's their whole history. And you dismissed it like it's nothing. Like they're nothing. You're being so emotional about this, she sighed. It's actually kind of embarrassing. They'll get another place. They'll adapt. Life goes on. but you're acting like the world is ending over some house. Get out, my grandfather said suddenly. His voice was quiet but sharp as a knife. Get out of this house right now. My sister blinked at him, surprised. Excuse me? You heard me. Get out. I don't want to see your face. I don't want to hear your voice. Take your father's money, take your honeymoon memories, and get out of my sight. Grandpa, she started, but he cut her off. You're a stranger to me, he said. My granddaughter died somewhere along the way, and you're just wearing her face. The girl I knew would never be this cruel, would never value a vacation over her grandparents' well-being, would never stand here and smile about stealing from family. You're not my granddaughter anymore. For the first time, my sister looked uncertain. Her smile faltered. You don't mean that? I mean every word, he said. Now get out. She looked at my father for support, but he was staring at the floor, refusing to meet anyone's eyes. She looked at me, and whatever she saw in my expression made her take a step back. Fine, she said, lifting her chin. I don't need this negativity anyway. I'm going to enjoy my honeymoon and my marriage, and you can all sit here being miserable about money and houses and whatever else you want to cry about. I'm done with this family drama. She grabbed her purse and walked out the back door, letting it slam behind her. The sound echoed through the kitchen, and then there was silence. My grandfather looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he turned to my father. You have 3 days to return my money, all $30,000. If you don't, I'm filing a police report for theft and pursuing this legally. Dad, you can't be serious, my father started. 3 days, my grandfather repeated. That's more than you deserve. He walked out without another word, and I heard his car start up a minute later. My grandmother must have been waiting in the vehicle. They drove away, and I stood there in the kitchen with my father and sister, feeling like I'd been dropped into an alternate reality where nothing made sense anymore. This is your fault, my father said, pointing at me. If you'd just helped pay for the wedding in the first place, none of this would have happened. That's when something in me snapped. All the years of keeping quiet, of swallowing my anger, of letting them walk all over me, it all came boiling up at once. My fault? You went into my private room, stole money that didn't belong to you, gave it away without asking, and destroyed your parents' lives in the process. How is any of that my fault? You should have warned me, he insisted. You should have told me that money was important. I shouldn't have had to tell you not to steal. I was screaming now. Really screaming. Normal people don't go into other people's rooms and take their things. Normal parents don't steal from their children. I'm your father. You're a thief. The word came out before I could stop it, but I didn't try to take it back. You and Mom and her... I pointed at my sister. You've all been leeching off me for 5 years. 5 years of my life wasted supporting people who don't appreciate it, don't respect it, and don't deserve it. My father moved forward quickly, his hand raised like he was going to hit me. I stepped back instinctively, but something in me decided right then that I was done being afraid, done being small, done being the person everyone walked all over. Touch me and I call the police, I said clearly. Try it. Please try it. He froze, his hand still raised, his face twisted with anger. We stood there staring at each other, and I saw the exact moment he realized I meant it, that I wasn't the same person who'd quietly absorbed his abuse for years, that something fundamental had changed. You're not my daughter anymore, he said finally, lowering his hand. Good, I replied, because you're not my father. A father protects his children, supports them, loves them. You've done none of those things. I walked to my room and started packing. I threw clothes into bags, grabbed my important documents, collected everything I truly cared about. It didn't take long. I'd never been allowed to accumulate much in this house anyway. Most of my money went to keeping everyone else afloat. As I packed, my mind was racing. 5 years. 5 years of my life poured into this place, into these people. 5 years of waking up before dawn, working until my body ached, coming home to find them lounging around like they were on permanent vacation. 5 years of hearing family takes care of family whenever I suggested maybe they should contribute. 5 years of being told I was selfish for wanting to keep even a small portion of what I earned. I grabbed my old shoebox of photos from the closet, the one place my father apparently hadn't searched thoroughly. Or maybe he had, and just hadn't cared about anything that wasn't cash. Inside were pictures from my childhood, back when things felt simpler. Me and my sister building sandcastles at the beach. My parents smiling at my high school graduation. Holiday dinners where everyone looked happy. I stared at those photos for a long moment. trying to reconcile those smiling faces with the people who'd just revealed themselves to be capable of such casual cruelty. When had it changed? When had my family become these strangers who only saw me as a resource to be exploited? Or had they always been this way, and I'd just been too young and naive to see it? Maybe the difference was that I'd had hope back then, hope that if I just worked hard enough, sacrificed enough, proved myself enough, they'd eventually appreciate me, eventually treat me like I mattered. But people don't change just because you want them to. They don't suddenly become grateful or kind or considerate just because you've earned it. Some people are takers, through and through, and I'd spent 5 years enabling them, teaching them that they could walk all over me and I'd just keep coming back for more. Not anymore. My mother came home while I was packing. She stood in my doorway, watching me throw things into boxes. "What are you doing?" "Leaving," I said simply, not even looking at her. "You can't leave. Who's going to pay the bills?" I actually laughed. The question was so absurd, so perfectly encapsulating everything wrong with this family, that I couldn't help it. "I don't know, Mom. Maybe you and Dad could get jobs. Maybe my adult sister could finally contribute something. Maybe you could all act like actual adults instead of overgrown children." "We raised you," she said, her voice taking on that manipulative tone she used when she wanted me to feel guilty, the tone that had worked on me for years. "We sacrificed everything for you. We gave you a home, food, clothes. We were there for every birthday, every milestone. You owe us." I stopped packing and turned to face her directly, really looked at her for maybe the first time in months. She looked older than I remembered, deeper lines around her mouth, gray showing through where she usually dyed her hair. But her expression was the same entitled expectation I'd seen 1,000 times before. "What exactly did you sacrifice?" I asked quietly. "Because from where I'm standing, you've been living off my paychecks for 5 years. You retired early and stuck me with all the bills. You raised me, yes, that's called being a parent. That's the bare minimum of what you're supposed to do when you choose to have children. It doesn't entitle you to financial support for the rest of your life. That's not how family works," she insisted. "Family supports each other. Family is there for each other through hard times." "Hard times?" I repeated incredulously. "Mom, you're not going through hard times. You're perfectly healthy. You're perfectly capable of working. You just don't want to. You want to sit on the couch watching television all day while someone else pays for your life. That's not hard times. That's laziness." "How dare you speak to me that way?" she said, her voice rising. "I'm your mother. You need to show some respect. Respect is earned," I said flatly. "And you've done nothing to earn it. You've watched me work myself to exhaustion for years and never once offered to help. You've watched Dad steal from his own parents and sided with him. You've let my sister become a spoiled, entitled brat who thinks the world owes her everything. You've created this mess, Mom, and now you're going to have to live in it. If you leave, don't bother coming back," she warned, playing her final card. The ultimate guilt trip. The threat that was supposed to make me cave like I always had before. But this time, it didn't work. This time, I felt nothing but relief. "That's the plan," I said calmly. "By the way, I'm not paying any more bills here. Not the mortgage, not the utilities, not the phone bills, nothing. As of right now, this household is your responsibility. Figure it out yourselves." Her face went pale. "You can't do that. We'll lose the house." "Then I guess you'll need to get jobs," I said, zipping up the last bag. "Lots of people your age are still working. You can too. It might even be good for you, give you some purpose beyond sitting around all day." "You're abandoning us," she said, and now there were tears in her eyes. Manipulative tears, I realized, the kind designed to make me feel guilty and change my mind. "After everything we've done for you, you're just walking away." "No," I corrected, slinging my bag over my shoulder. "I'm choosing myself for the first time in 5 years. There's a difference." I pushed past her without another word. She called after me, her voice climbing into that high-pitched whine she used when she wasn't getting her way. But I didn't stop, didn't look back, just loaded everything into my car and drove away from that house, from those people, from that version of myself who'd let them use her for so long. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel, my vision blurry with tears, but underneath all the pain and anger was something else, something that felt almost like freedom. I rented a small studio apartment in the city center that same day. It was tiny, just one room with a kitchenette and a bathroom barely big enough to turn around in, but it was mine. My name on the lease. My space. Nobody else's drama bleeding through the walls. The landlord, an older woman with kind eyes, handed me the keys and said, First place of your own? First place that's actually mine, I replied, my voice catching slightly. She smiled like she understood more than I'd said. Best feeling in the world, isn't it? She was right. The first night in my new place, I sat on the floor eating takeout directly from the container, and I felt lighter than I had in years. Exhausted, heartbroken, but lighter. The next few months were a blur of adjustment and consequences. My father couldn't come up with the $30,000 in 3 days. Of course he couldn't. He'd never been able to produce money when it actually mattered. My grandfather followed through on his threat and filed a police report. The words theft and appropriation of funds got thrown around. Lawyers got involved. I had to give a deposition, sitting in a sterile office recounting how my father had taken the money. The whole process was draining. Lawyers asking the same questions different ways, trying to find inconsistencies that didn't exist. But the evidence was clear. My grandfather's withdrawal, the timeline, my sister's social media posts thanking Dad for the amazing gift, my father's loan payment records. 8 months after that horrible Sunday, my father stood in front of a judge and was formally convicted of criminal theft. The evidence was overwhelming. I'd testified about the envelope, my grandparents provided documentation of the money and its purpose, my sister's honeymoon expenses had a paper trail. The judge wasn't sympathetic. She actually lectured him from the bench, talking about how elder financial abuse was one of the most despicable crimes she encountered, how children were supposed to protect their parents, not exploit them. My father stood there in his cheap suit, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. He tried to speak, to explain, but the judge cut him off. "I've heard enough excuses," she said sharply. "You stole from your elderly parents during a financial crisis. You showed no remorse. You blamed everyone except yourself. This court finds you guilty and sentences you to 2 years of probation with mandatory community service. You will also be required to attend financial counseling and make restitution payments of $500 monthly until the debt is satisfied." The look of shock on his face when the sentence came down would have been funny if it wasn't so pathetic. He'd clearly expected to walk away with nothing more than a fine. He actually turned to look at me, like I was supposed to do something, like I was supposed to stand up and save him the way I'd been saving him for years. I just stared back blankly until he looked away. My grandparents lost their house anyway. The bank foreclosed during the legal proceedings, and by the time my father was sentenced, it was already too late. The property had been sold at auction. Everything they'd built over 4 decades was gone. I watched my grandmother cry as movers cleared out their belongings, packing up 50 years of memories into boxes destined for storage units we could barely afford. "I'm so sorry," I told them for the 100th time. "I should have hidden it better. I should have—" "Stop," my grandfather said firmly. "This is not your fault. You did exactly what you were supposed to do. You kept our trust. Your father is the one who failed. Your father is the one who destroyed everything. Don't you dare take that burden on yourself." But I felt it anyway. The guilt, the responsibility, the crushing weight of having been the last line of defense between them and disaster, and somehow not being enough. I immediately offered them my apartment. It was cramped with 3 people. My studio barely fit 1 person comfortably, let alone 3, but they were grateful and kind and actually helped with chores and expenses when they could. Living with them was nothing like living with my parents. They said thank you. They asked how my day was. They treated me like a person instead of an ATM machine. My grandfather insisted on contributing what he could from his Social Security check, even though I told him repeatedly it wasn't necessary. "I won't be a burden," he said firmly one morning over coffee. "We pay our way." "You're not a burden," I insisted. "You never could be." "Then let me help," he replied. "It's not charity if we're family helping each other. Real family, not the kind that just takes." So we split the groceries 3 ways, even though it meant they were sometimes eating less than they should. My grandmother took over most of the cooking, which was actually a blessing. After years of throwing together quick meals between delivery shifts, coming home to real food, actual recipes with vegetables and seasonings and care, felt like luxury. We developed routines. My grandfather would wake up early with me, make coffee while I got ready for work, and we'd sit together in comfortable silence for 10 minutes before I left, just existing in each other's presence, no demands or expectations. My grandmother would have dinner ready when I got home, and we'd eat together at my tiny folding table, talking about our days. Real conversations, not the performative small talk I'd gotten used to with my parents. They told me stories I'd never heard before, about how they met. My grandmother had been working at a diner where my grandfather stopped for coffee every morning for 6 months before finally asking her out, about raising 4 kids in a tiny house, how they'd make it work through creativity and compromise, about the fights they'd had, the struggles they'd overcome, the way they'd built a life together through dedication and genuine partnership. "Your father was our youngest," my grandmother told me one evening, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea. "We spoiled him, I think. His older siblings had to work for everything, but by the time he came along, we were more financially stable. We didn't make him get a job in high school like we had the others. We paid for things we shouldn't have. We taught him, accidentally, that he didn't have to earn what he got, that someone would always be there to catch him." "You didn't know," I said quietly. "We should have," she replied. "We saw the signs, the entitlement, the way he'd borrow money and forget to pay it back, the way he treated work as optional, relationships as transactional. We saw it all, and we made excuses. We told ourselves he'd grow out of it, that he just needed more time to mature. But people don't grow out of who they fundamentally are. They just become more of it." My grandfather squeezed her hand. "We failed him by making things too easy. And in failing him, we helped create the situation that hurt you. That hurt all of us." "You didn't hurt me," I insisted. "He did. He made his choices. With skills we taught him," my grandmother said sadly. "With values we failed to instill. We're responsible for that, at least partially. And we're sorry. We're so sorry you had to pay the price for our mistakes." I cried that night, but they were different tears than I'd cried before. Not bitter tears of anger or frustration, but cleansing tears of release. Of being seen and heard and understood by people who actually cared about me as a person, not just what I could provide for them. My mother moved in with my sister and her husband, which I heard about through my grandmother. Apparently, the arrangement was causing tension from day one. My sister's husband hadn't signed up to support his mother-in-law indefinitely, and my mother's presence was already straining their new marriage. My grandmother mentioned something about them looking for a small apartment my mother could afford with Social Security, but I didn't ask for details. It wasn't my problem anymore. I cut contact with all of them, blocked numbers, blocked social media, refused to respond to attempts at communication. My sister tried to reach out a few times, always with the same message. I was being dramatic, holding grudges, ruining the family. I deleted every message without reading past the first line. My life became smaller but infinitely better. I still worked as a delivery driver, but now every dollar I earned went toward my own life. I could save money. I could buy myself things I wanted instead of needed. I could breathe without the constant weight of responsibility crushing my chest. My grandparents were the best roommates I could have asked for. My grandfather helped fix things around the apartment. My grandmother cooked meals that actually tasted like someone cared. They told me stories about their youth, offered advice when I asked for it, and never once made me feel like I owed them for the privilege of their presence. One evening, about a year after I left, my grandmother sat me down on the couch and took my hands in hers. "I need to tell you something," she said gently. "Okay," I said, nervous about what was coming. "Your grandfather and we blame ourselves for how your father turned out. We raised him. We must have done something wrong to create a man who would steal from his own parents, who would exploit his daughter, who would value money over family. That's not your fault," I said immediately. "He made his choices." "Maybe," she said softly. "But we enabled him for so long. Every time he borrowed money and didn't pay it back, we let it go. Every time he made excuses, we believed him. We taught him that actions don't have consequences, and he passed that lesson on to your sister. We failed him. And in failing him, we failed you too. You're the only family who hasn't failed me," I told her honestly. "You're the only ones who've treated me like I matter." She pulled me into a hug, and I let myself cry against her shoulder. Not sad tears. Exactly. Just release. Years of tension finally draining away. Work got better too. My boss noticed I seemed happier, more focused, and promoted me to a route supervisor position. It came with a pay raise and better hours. Suddenly, I had money left over at the end of each month. Real savings. The kind of financial security I'd never experienced before. I made friends in my new neighborhood. Real friends, not people who wanted something from me. We'd meet for coffee, go to movies, just exist together without expectation or obligation. One of them, a woman who lived 2 floors down, became particularly close. She was the first person I told my whole story to, and when I finished, she just hugged me and said, "I'm so proud of you for getting out." Nobody had ever said they were proud of me before. Not for anything. The words cracked something open in my chest, and I cried in her apartment for 20 minutes straight while she just held me and let me fall apart. 2 years after everything imploded, my life had transformed completely. My grandfather died that winter. Heart attack. Sudden and painless. He went to sleep and didn't wake up, which my grandmother said was how he would have wanted it. We held a small funeral with just a handful of people. My father showed up uninvited, still fulfilling his probation requirements, and tried to speak to me. I walked away without acknowledging him. He wasn't entitled to my grief. My sister sent me a message around that time. Long, rambling, full of excuses. She said family should forgive each other, that she missed me. I read it once, then blocked her number. Missing someone doesn't undo the harm they caused. By then, I'd moved into a bigger apartment with my grandparents, an actual one-bedroom where we weren't constantly stepping over each other. I had a job I was good at, a home that felt safe, people who loved me without conditions. I had savings and a future that belonged entirely to me. My grandmother moved into a senior living community after that. She said the apartment held too many memories, and she wanted to be around people her own age. We still talked on the phone every week. She still told me she was proud of me. She still thanked me for taking her in when she had nowhere else to go. "You saved us," she told me once. "When your grandfather needed help, you were the only one who stepped up. The only one we could trust. That says everything about who you are." "I just did what was right," I said. "Exactly," she replied. "You did what was right, even when it was hard, even when it cost you. That's the difference between you and your father. You understand that other people matter." He never learned that lesson. I think about that conversation a lot, about how easily I could have become like my parents, entitled, selfish, unable to see past my own wants. But somewhere along the way, despite being raised by people who modeled all the wrong behaviors, I learned to be different. Maybe it was spite. Maybe it was stubbornness. Maybe I just got lucky with whatever genetic or psychological factors determine personality. Whatever the reason, I broke the cycle. I became the person my family should have been. I still see my mother and sister occasionally from a distance. They live in the same neighborhood where I work my route. Sometimes I spot them at the grocery store or walking down the street. My sister has 2 kids now. My mother looks older, more worn down. They never see me. I make sure of that. I'm good at being invisible when I need to be. I wonder sometimes if my sister tells her kids about me, about the aunt they've never met who abandoned the family because she was selfish and mean. I wonder if my father, living in his small apartment with his part-time warehouse job, ever thinks about how different his life could have been if he'd just been a decent person, if any of them ever lie awake at night and feel regret for what they destroyed. But mostly, I don't wonder about them at all. They're part of my past, not my present. I built a new life from scratch, and it's better than anything I had before. I have actual relationships based on mutual respect. I have financial stability. I have peace. 3 years after everything fell apart, I'm 30 years old and finally living the life I should have had all along. I wake up in my own apartment, just mine now, cozy and organized exactly how I like it. I go to work supervising delivery routes and actually enjoy what I do. I come home to a space that feels safe and comfortable. I meet up with friends who value me. I save money for trips and treats and someday maybe a house. I'm not rich, I'm not famous or extraordinary or special. I'm just a woman who finally learned to prioritize herself, who walked away from toxicity even when it hurt, who chose her own well-being over familial obligation. And that's enough. That's more than enough. Sometimes I still get angry. I'll be driving my route and suddenly remember some specific incident. My mother demanding grocery money while wearing new clothes she bought with my card. My sister complaining about being bored. My father lecturing me about responsibility from the couch. The rage comes back sharp and fresh. But then I remember where I am now. What I built. The fact that I got out and survived. And the anger fades into something closer to pity. They're still trapped in their dysfunction. I'm free. That's the real victory. Last month, I got a letter from my father. It was forwarded through my grandmother because he doesn't have my current address. In it, he apologized, said he understood now why I left. That prison had given him time to think, that he wished he could go back and do things differently. He asked if we could meet for coffee. I thought about it for a week. Then I wrote back, short and firm. I told him I appreciated the apology but wasn't interested in reconnecting. That I'd moved on and preferred to keep moving forward. That I wished him well but didn't want further contact. My grandmother told me later that he cried when he got my response. Part of me felt guilty, but most of me felt relieved. I'd set a clear boundary and maintained it. But whatever happens, I know one thing for certain. I'll never let anyone use me like that again. Never let obligation override my well-being. Never sacrifice my life for people who wouldn't do the same for me. I learned that lesson the hard way, and it's one I'll carry forever. Tonight, I'm sitting on my couch in my quiet apartment, drinking tea and reading a book. It's a simple evening, a normal evening, the kind of evening I never got to have when I was drowning under the weight of supporting 4 adults who should have been supporting themselves. This is what peace feels like, I realize. Not excitement or drama or big emotional moments, just quiet contentment, just existing in a space where nobody's yelling at me or demanding money or making me feel small, just being Bryn on my own terms, living my own life. And honestly, after everything I went through to get here, this peaceful, ordinary, completely average evening feels like the greatest victory of my life.